Welcome to the Cycling Performance Podcast, presented by Team EF Coaching, where we explore the intersection between the science of sport and the art of balance, human behavior, and sustainable performance on and off the bike.
Welcome everyone to the Cycling Performance Podcast brought to you by Team EF Coaching. Today, we're here to talk to Coryn Labecki on Colby Pierce.
And I'm Nathan Haas, and welcome to the show, Coryn. I was actually just educated by Colby yesterday that I've been saying your name wrong for a very long time. And I think this is a bit of a tomatoes kind of a thing. I was always saying Coryn. And Colby was like, it's Coryn for the win.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to describe it. I've never heard that one before. So good job, Colby, bringing that one up. But yeah, I know my name is spelled a little bit uniquely. And so there's a lot of pronunciations. I'm cool with whatever, but typically it's Coryn. So Coryn for the win.
Coryn for the win. Well, I think it's a pretty apt way for us to just jump into it. Coryn is one of our superstar coaches at Team EF Coaching. But speaking of winning, I feel like it's definitely our place to actually speak a little bit about your career in the first place. And I was doing a little bit of research just on our coaches a few months ago, and it kind of blew my mind because I didn't know it was possible to have this many national titles, but Coryn has won 74 national titles. She's won Flanders. She's won a stage of the Tour de France Femme, won a stage of the Vuelta, which leads me to believe that you might actually be the USA's most accomplished female cyclist ever.
Potentially. You did get one wrong. I have not won a stage at the Tour de France Femme, but I won a stage at the Giro and the Vuelta.
Of the Giro.
Yeah.
Maybe I mixed that. It's still as equally impressive in my mind. Was that because the Femme hadn't restarted by the time you retired, or did you get to race?
So I did one full, I think it was 7 or 8 day Tour de France Femme, 2023 it was, I think. But then, previously I had done the stage in Paris on the Champs-Élysées, I think 3 times, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've been in a couple different versions, but have not won a stage there.
Well, I don't think that really takes the sheen off your accomplishment because it's quite remarkable, to be honest.
Thanks. Yeah. With the national championships, I mean, I've been racing for a really long time, since I was 10 or 11 years old. And I did a lot of different disciplines of cycling as well. So everything kind of stacked up rather quickly as I got the ball rolling, and we were chasing after national championships. And to be honest, racing collegiately more than doubled my count as well, because there's an individual omnium for racing collegiately in the US, and then also a team omnium, and I was part of a pretty dominant team, so I can owe it to Marian University to really up the numbers there. But I think 1 or 2 U23 titles in there, and then a handful of pro titles as well, which were probably the most meaningful, of course. But quite a number of national championships throughout my career.
So you started racing from 10, 11. For me, it's always a really interesting story. It's sort of that your come to cycling moment. What was it that brought you into cycling?
For me, it was just a great way to be outside and spend time with my family. So my parents had a tandem that they rode a lot, and then eventually I kind of got big enough to join, and I got put on the back of the tandem and do some rides with my dad. And it was just a fun way to get out and do stuff. And we were always a pretty active and athletic family. I was snowboarding since I was 4. I played soccer, when I started when I was 4 also, I think. But always into sports. My dad was always into sports. And then I just really grew to like cycling, and then eventually I got off the tandem and got my own bike. And then yeah, it's a well told story, but a friend of my dad's dared me to do the kids race at Redlands, and I love a good challenge. And so we signed up for the race, and it was like one lap of the criterium course, and I, had like a warm up and everything, and a trainer, and then I crushed it. I crushed a lap, and then the race came around the next year. Same thing. My dad's friend dared me to do it, and then I won again. But I was hungry for more. I was like, there's got to be more than this. Just one race every year. There's got to be more. And uh, we did a little research and found out about racing and junior gears and having a license. And from then on, it's history. I went on to racing every weekend to state championships and national championships, and cycling more or less taking over my life for the better. But and like that was my calendar every year. So yeah, that's just kind of how it got started.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common story that itching to do something that you love and then you get successful at it, and success often breeds success and the boulders gets rolling. But
Mhm.
did you find that doing so much track cycling in your younger years really helped your sort of positioning and ability to race road?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I got really lucky. I think I started on the track in 2012 or 2013 when they just built the indoor wooden track in LA. Um, and yeah, I had just started cycling, and then I went out there, we went to check it out, and I remember I crashed a couple times because I was borrowing a bike and it had some really bad tires on it, and slipping on the track is not very fun, especially a new wooden one. So there was a steep learning curve, and I think we maybe had 2 or 3 months before nationals, and that was like the inaugural race once they built the track. Um, but you know, that was a kind of cycling that I wasn't really good at right away, and I had to learn. And then eventually, get my own bike, and I still liked it, and I wanted to do better at it. And I think it did really shape me as a rider in terms of, yeah, positioning, how to handle my bike, also, doing it really early. And then, the added learning curve of being on an indoor wooden track as well, to be really mindful about how to ride that track versus, being on an outdoor concrete track was also a steep learning curve too. So not only just my own handling, but like how I handle myself on like a really difficult track, so to speak. Um, but yeah, I think it really did shape me a lot as a rider. And when people ask me like, "Oh, should I do track?" I'm like, absolutely. It's a little
Mhm.
scary and daunting at first because you're riding up against a wall. But what you learn from it is like tenfold than what would you would learn from another discipline of cycling.
Yeah, I agree. I think, didn't we first meet at a track camp that I coached a billion years ago? Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I think you might have been even an athlete, Colby. And were we doing like lead outs on the motor with was it Chad Hartley and like Holloway or something, like
That
Chipotle
sounds right.
days? I
Yeah.
think you and Holloway were doing Madison a lot, I
Yep.
remember. And I was just this little 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid on the track following you
Yeah.
guys.
This would have been like 2007, 8, 9, somewhere in there probably. That's about when I was racing with Holloway a lot. We were doing 6 days in Europe, and yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I think for me as a coach, whenever people ask me the same question, should I race track? The answer is always yes. I agree with what you said. It's daunting a bit, but the saying I like to use is that the track is like a microscope. It kind of zeroes in on your weaknesses, like following wheels, for example, or positioning. You have to think. Things happen so quickly on the track, seemingly more quickly than they do on the road because everything's kind of compressed in time. The races are shorter, they're faster, and so when you make a mistake, even a bike length off, being a bike length off someone's wheel can be the difference between you beating them or not in the sprint a lap later, right? So it sort of magnifies your skills in terms of positioning. And I think the velodrome banking in LA is 42 degrees, 43, something like that. which
Yeah.
looks, quite intimidating. But centrifugal force is a thing. So it works out in the end most of the time.
Yeah.
But occasionally you fall off, but that's just cycling, right? So yeah.
I think for me, coming from a mountain bike background, when I began racing road, and even into my first years in the World Tour, I felt at a distinct disadvantage when I compared myself to the riders that had done a lot of track. For me, it was, in Australia, you were either mountain biking in the summer or you were doing track. It was not very common to do both. But then when I used to see just the kind of intelligence within the bunch, like you said, Colby, it's these small mistakes that you get to make over and over again track racing, because you can actually race 4 or 5 times in a night, which means that you actually got to see 4 or 5 finals. And the final is normally where you actually do, 90% of your learning, not necessarily in all the sort of pre-tactical stuff that happens in a road race. And whilst those elements of road racing are still super important to be aware of and be able to intuit when moves are real, which moves are important, positioning, to win a bike race, it still comes down to the final if you're coming from a group. And I think one of my biggest regrets as a cyclist was actually not going to the track and just going through that intense sort of pressure cooker school of actually learning how to race finals. And I think I got there eventually, in my career, and I got much better at the bunch sprint and, leading out and all of this stuff. But I think I actually learned my cues from watching the track races in road cycling and how they did it. And I think, for me, when I'm the same, if someone asks me, should I race track? I say, look, I never really did it, but I absolutely think you should.
Yeah.
I think another important thing that I learned from track too is like the awareness of like the other riders, because you can see all the way around the track. So, you know what the gap is, you know where they are, you know what they're doing in front of you and behind you. And with, say road cycling or even mountain bike, like out of sight, out of mind. I don't know what the gap is until a moto tells me or someone on the side of the road is counting. So I find that track cycling really keeps you aware constantly because you're able to see everything too.
Yeah. Especially in Madison, you learn as soon as you're on relief and you swing to the top of the track, you're looking around and surveying the race. So it teaches you to have that kind of eyes in the back of your head, which is also quite useful as a parent. But in cycling, it's really critical to have that awareness of what's happening. Are people responding to the attack? Or as the group swung up and everybody's kind of smoked? So you get that pulse on the rhythm of when the ideal time to go is. And I think that's a real magical aspect of track. It sort of gives you that intuition to read the group and understand that, you might have an attack that's whatever, 500 watts for 20 seconds or something. There are times when that attack could be completely impotent because you use it when everyone's fired up, it's strong. There are other times when everyone's smoked and you use the same attack, or maybe it's not even as strong because you're tired as well, but you get an instant gap. So having that read is quite useful. The other nice thing is, as a coach, when you're coaching someone on the track, there's so much more opportunity for growth and feedback because you can see your athlete during the entire event. So you can see when they make mistakes or when they do the right thing and then give them that feedback. Whereas in a crit, even you see them for a few seconds every lap and you're like, oh, move up or follow that attack or whatever. And then they go disappear behind the trees or the buildings. You have no idea what's going on. It can be a lot harder for a coach to get an understanding of how the athlete's actually racing, how they're positioning themselves, how they're responding to moves, where they are in the group. Whereas on the velodrome, you can watch them the entire time and film them. And now, like I've got an athlete I'm working with who lives in Seattle, and they've got this amazing program where they film every race, every Friday night they film it. And the filming is quite good. So we spend all this time analyzing his racing afterwards and looking and saying, oh, okay, here you didn't respond very quickly to this attack. Let's talk about that. Or here you decided to go at this moment. That was a good decision and why. So yeah. Track's very different from road and crit in that respect, or TTs.
Absolutely. So, Coryn, I wanted to ask the question today. You're of Asian American heritage, and we all know that cycling is a very white sport. In general, it's not the most diverse sport, across all of the professional sports in the world. And then women's cycling as well has seen, you know, a huge change in growth in terms of what it's become now from when you first started racing professionally. I wanted to see what your thoughts were on one, how it was to be, you know, kind of a diversity figure within women's cycling, and then further to that, how you feel as if this sort of space within the sport can change, and how we can actually encourage people of more from more places to actually join our beautiful sport.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's honestly actually something that I never really thought about too much, because I always found sport to be the equalizer, right? Like we're all on the start line to win the race, not because you're from X, Y, and Z country or skin color or whatever. Um, and I'm a first generation American. My parents immigrated to the US. So I think for us, or maybe we have a natural feeling of being like a pioneer or trailblazer of some sorts, and kind of like constantly figuring it out. But I never felt like an outlier. I just loved sports, because of the challenge and because of the way that it brings people together, no matter where you're from, to have the same goal. Um, so I never put myself under a microscope, because of that. And if anything, I'm really glad looking back on my career that I am like kind of a pioneer of some sorts of for Asians and Asian Americans, and Americans are also kind of a minority in the sport too. So putting that stake in the ground for those people, and I think to get more people in is to just not be afraid. And for one, I'm an example, and there's a lot of other riders out there who are examples for that too. But like, what do you have to lose, or why be scared? I This was kind of like what I said in my EF video when I retired. Like, if there's something that I can tell, some advice that I can give to a younger rider or an up and coming rider or whatever, is just to not be afraid, right? Don't be discouraged because of anything, really, because of where you're from, or you feel like you don't have the confidence to win, but just give it a try. What's like the worst thing that could happen? And it's sport, like we're all there for the same reasons. So yeah, I mean, I never really overthought it, but I think I'd like to encourage people to do what they like and do what they love, and not ever feel discouraged, and don't be afraid to do something, because especially if you really like it.
I really appreciate that message. I'd like to put myself in the place of a young rider who's inspired by what you have to say and your career and your accomplishments. What would you say if they asked you, yeah, but Coryn, you're super talented. I feel like I don't have that talent. I think a lot of riders that I see are young, really feel like they're held back by a fear that they're just not going to be good enough. How do we coach someone in that position? How do we guide them? How do we inspire them?
Yeah, and in that case, I think it's always important. Well, actually, in any case, to like find your why or your reason. And typically, you do it because you like it, right? So you ride because you get together with your team twice a week, and you get some training in, or you go to the races together, or you like to be outside and challenge yourself, or whatever that reason is, and just really lean into that, because you're not going to do something that you don't like. You're not going to continue to do that and like continue to bash yourself because you're not doing well. And of course, you'd like to do well, but I think you need to have another outside reason of why you're doing it. And if you don't have that, kind of dig a little deeper and find what that is for you. Why do you swing your leg over your bike? And in times where you're a little discouraged because you're not doing super well, or you don't have the talent, lean into the reasons why you like it. And I think then it brings you closer to doing better and having consistency and progress. And, also helps having a really good support system to help you to continue to grow, whether that's your parents or your coach or some mentors that you have, to foster a really positive attitude about getting better. And it's not just about winning always all the time. And sure, that's great. But I really liked riding because it got me outside and I could just ride and explore and I can clear my head and whatever else and travel. So, for me, those were the reasons why I really like to do it. And it's different for everybody, but I think you kind of have to lean into those things, when you're feeling a little discouraged.
So, I mean, I really resonate with the idea of having mentors or people that inspire you. I definitely had some amazing influences in my cycling journey from a young age, right until the end of my career, and probably even still now, just in terms of people who are great examples of just loving riding their bike, not necessarily being competitive anymore. And our goals and aspirations change through our athletic journey. But I'd love to ask the question, who inspired you? Who were your mentors in your career?
It's also another good question. I think, my parents were really big mentors for me. They really supported me in a lot of the things that I love to do. And then as I got into racing and I think, watching the tour every night in the summers, like no school, you don't have to be in bed by a certain time. And I'd watch the reruns of the tour, from start to finish super late. And that kind of really gave me the bug for cycling. And then as I started racing and watching, or at least trying to learn more about pro women's racing, Ina Teutenberg at the time was like a really big rider, and coincidentally, she actually, my very first national championship on the road, 2004, it was in Park City. Coincidentally, she was actually there handing out the medals, but I had no idea at that time. Um, and so she gave me my first national championship medal. And then later, as I learned more about cycling and found out that she was handing them out, I was like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. And then I don't know, when I was 13, so maybe 2 or 3 years later, I started racing with the pros, and back then, a lot of the Euro pros would come over to the States for some early spring racing before the World Tour was a thing, and they would race Redlands and Merced Classic. And then I would jump in and do these crits with them, um, and then like just go into the line with them, and it was just like crazy to think, that was like a rider that I kind of looked up to, and I'm like right there with them. So that was like a big motivator for me.
That's super cool. That's super cool. Yeah, thinking a little bit about the future of the sport, and it's no secret that road cycling is struggling a bit in the U.S. right now. So it concerns me a little because I hear your story about how you were inspired and you raced the junior race at Redlands, and that got you going, based on that challenge that your parents' friends gave you. And I found my start in Colorado when the Coors Classic was here. They had a kids race series, a junior race series called the Red Zinger Mini Classic. That's how I got started. And I don't hear a lot of that kind of racing for really young kids that can get them started now. Hopefully, at least some of that, maybe all of it, has been replaced by the NICA program, which is the nationwide mountain biking program, which has just taken off like crazy here in Colorado. I don't know if it's the same for you. You're in Pennsylvania at the moment, right? So I think NICA is pretty big there. Is that true? You hear a lot about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, it is pretty big here in the East Coast, and I actually coach like 3 riders, local riders that do the NICA series. So it's really
Okay.
cool to learn more about that because that was not a thing when I was a junior.
Mhm.
And it's obviously really popular, and even just gaining, you know, kids who just like to ride, not
Mhm.
necessarily race
Yeah.
competitively. And I think that's like such a great start to get kids into cycling, and obviously a safe space on the trails, not on the roads. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just super fun and low key. And then they obviously race and learn a lot from that and like the skills and everything. So that's also really cool too.
Yeah. I think it gives those kids a sense of community and hopefully to connect with a mentor. And like you said, maybe they're into racing, maybe not. It doesn't really matter if they're on bikes and having fun, then I would say they're doing it right. Racing doesn't have to be the end goal for everyone, but yeah.
I think, Coryn, in many ways, you probably inspired a lot of young women, in the USA and far beyond. But now witnessing the sport from the position of being retired and also being a coach, and part of being a coach involves us zooming out to see values that people teach, and messages that riders have, and also attitudes, how they hold themselves and how they do interviews and how they show their spirit. Is there anyone in women's cycling now that you would consider to be an excellent role model with the sport?
Um, yeah, I think, stepping back now, a lot of the top riders are doing really well, and the depth is quite wide now. You know, I I can't really put a finger on just one, to be honest. I think, riders like Demi Vollering are, really open about, um, you know, adversity and everything. So I think that's also a good example. But I think they're all really professional and outspoken for, good reasons. And um, I can't say that there is a rider that is not a good example. But yeah, I think it's becoming a lot more professional and there's a lot more exposure. So it's a great time to learn about women's cycling and get into it. And yeah, there's a lot of really good leaders there showing off the sport.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree. I think uh, the UCIs, they don't always do things that seemingly are in sync with how people have been around the sport for a long time want it to go, but they've definitely taken strides towards professionalizing women's cycling in the last few years, especially. And I think we're seeing that the sport has more depth than ever. I totally agree. There are a lot of really amazing athletes who we get to see, and a result of that is that we have coverage of women's races. Like that was the biggest problem for so long. Women are out there crushing it, but they weren't on TV. We didn't know. Nobody knew. And now in the press and online, we can watch women's races happening. We can see the tactical moments. That's inspirational. That's hopefully something that'll reach young riders and help them understand that that's a career path potentially if they're interested in that. It's a thing that exists. They can be inspired by these strong women who are out there smashing it on the bike. So it's really cool to see that.
Absolutely. And to tie that back too with like what inspired me is like the late night reruns of the tour,
Yeah,
from start to finish. And
yeah,
I'm a big supporter of like coverage, and if there was a choice between prize money and TV coverage, I would choose TV coverage. You show off your sponsors, you are able to, show yourself throughout the race. And then, you know, as a spectator, you also see more of the race too. So I think, yeah, having more races on TV is better. And, if that inspires the little girl who's watching the replay of, the Vuelta later today, that's super cool. And you see it, it's like visual and you're like, that's what I want to be one day.
mm,
I mean, I think the prize money, it's such an interesting debate because obviously there should be parity, right? Like it's nonsensical that this isn't a thing. But it's a little bit of a misdemeanor that, men's salaries are made up of prize money. I mean, I remember when we won Liège-Bastogne-Liège with Dan Martin, and I was thinking, oh yeah, here comes my payday, right? And then you find out that the winner of one of the monuments wins 18,000 euros. And once the split is done and the taxes to Belgium are done, I think it was like $820 at the end of it, right? And it's like, not that you're not happy to see $820 come in, but I've I've always sort of seen the growth of women's sport also to be something that's like, a long-term view on, where actually the most important thing is that it's televised, that the race is actually being seen, more non-endemic sponsorship can come in, and we can actually start to celebrate the athletic performance that the women are doing. And I love seeing the classics now where it's like, it's almost parody when it comes to the coverage. I was really disappointed with Roubaix this year. I thought that was just shame for me. But it's becoming more and more common that actually I'm more entertained by the women's race than the men's race. And it's like, it's so cool to see, that it's more aggressive in many ways. The winner is less predictable. We're in an outrageous period of cycling right now with guys like Tadej, Mathieu, Wout. We're seeing some freaks of a generation, but maybe a generation that we won't see these kind of heights again, or not for a long time. But women's cycling is just absolutely exploding, and I think in many ways for me, there's less names that I know in the men's World Tour than I actually know in the women's World Tour, and I think for me, it's a really beautiful thing to see. Like you said, Colby, it's becoming a real career path now. And without that TV coverage, I think a lot of the money that's flowing into the sport now wouldn't be. But do I also think we should just have parity of prize money? It's like, of course, like if a race can't afford to give up also the prize money for women, then maybe just take it from the men.
Right. Yeah. And we have to mention the women's finish at Strada this year. It was like, what an amazing nail biter, right? That was just such a joy to watch, and definitely on the edge of the seat. So a great example of how I love the fact that at the same time we have this beautiful paradox where there are women who are favorites going into any race, but at the same time you really don't know who's going to win. And not to beat the horse to death, like men's racing is exciting in its own way right now because we have the dominance of Tadej, which is exciting in its own right. But at the same time, people complain about it because it's boring because he wins so much, or that's what they say. And yet people tune in to see him win over and over again. So there's this sort of paradox, right? It's like, the same thing for years in the Giro. People complain like, the Giro is only won by a handful of seconds because the field doesn't have a true champion. There's just several B riders who are kind of battling it out. Then you get to the Tour and someone wins by 5 minutes. Oh, it's boring because, we knew the race was over with a week to go. It's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's a bike race. Sometimes you're going to have someone who smashes everybody. Sometimes you're going to have those nail biters. But the nail biters are the ones you remember. And that was the case this year at the women's Strada finish, no question. It was like to the last corner, 85 meters to go. And we were all going, what's happening? Who's going to do this? So good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, and Roubaix was also another really good example of that too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah,
Marianne Vos to the line.
Yeah.
But you gotta love to see that, with a little bit of an underdog. Granted, Franzi has been having an awesome season, but you also love to see an underdog kind of unseat a favorite. So
totally,
really good racing this season.
And Vos is such a legend. I've followed her for years, and she's an athlete who's won world titles in 3 disciplines, if I'm not mistaken. Like that's so cool. Love it when you see an athlete come who's multi-talented and in different disciplines. That's just beautiful. Her precision and ability to execute in different courses and persevere is impressive. So, yeah.
So, Coryn, you've lived cycling for a long time, and you've also seen people make mistakes in their approach. I think one of the things that seems to be a little bit endemic in both men's and women's cycling, but I think it seems sometimes more apparent in women's cycling is, eating disorders or their behaviors around eating and nutrition. If you were to give us, a 20,000-foot view on what you think are the kind of key tenets that you would pass on to any young female getting into cycling, or even to the seasoned professional that's been doing it for a long time. I think, who we speak to doesn't necessarily always need to be the young junior. They're the easiest to mold as a coach. You can get them using a lot of, good behaviors from the start of their career. But if you were to give a view looking over your career about some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make, and how to address those, I would love to hear that. Very curious.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think it's with nutrition, it's like, you always want to make sure that you eat enough. And my, favorite way to look at it is, you're a race car, right? And if you don't put fuel in the race car, it's not going to go anywhere. So, you could be the fastest race car with the best engine, so or like, really light with the nicest bike, but if you don't have fuel to put in that race car, you're not going to go anywhere. So I always see it as you need to top up on your fuel and make sure that it's also high octane, right? Like you don't want to be putting unleaded in your car. You want to be putting premium, race fuel. So that's how I always saw it, and that's how I would also explain it to other people. Whether you're new into cycling or a junior. But yeah, it's just as simple as that. And so if you don't fuel enough, you can expect to run out of gas when it really matters. So you got to keep everything topped up and ready to go. Not just nutrition wise, but making sure that your engine is in top shape, it's clean, you get your car is clean. Um, it's a lot of different factors in terms of getting ready to perform, not just nutritionally. And that's kind of how I approach my coaching too. But yeah, just got to keep everything in tip top shape, and there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But yeah, in general for nutrition, it's making sure that you're topped up and fueled up.
On a practical level, what were some of your favorite foods you would eat on long rides? I mean, we live in a world of, to a certain degree, as a professional, you're kind of constrained by practicality and what's available, right? You fly to Europe and you can't pick your favorite things. But if you were home and going for a really long ride, what would be in your pocket? Were you a gel and mix kind of person, or more Rice Krispie treats, or what goes in your jersey pocket?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the mood a little bit, but when I had like, really high volume training or like a training camp, I would always like prep some rice cakes at the beginning of the week. And I'm a
Mhm.
little bit more of a savory person, so like the egg and bacon kind of rice cake for me with like a little bit of soy was my go-to. And yeah, like I actually hate sweets, and I don't know if that's because I had so much of it on the bike in terms of gels. But any chance I could get like a savory rice cake, or I think one of our nutrition sponsors had like a salted caramel bar that would just like take the sweetness edge off. That those were like my favorites. So I guess I like to balance the over sweetness with the salty. But yeah, my go-to is like egg and bacon rice cake.
Yeah, I found the same. I think my sweet tooth has been kind of spoiled a bit by the years of gels and sweet drinks, right? And there's nothing like the end of a stage race. You just feels like your taste buds are just exploding when you hit that sugar hits your mouth again. It's like it's a very unpleasant sense of overload. I agree. I went for a lot of savory stuff. Yeah.
So, Coryn, another question that I wanted to hit you with today, because I'm always really fascinated about what's going on up here in a bike rider. And I've watched your Flanders final many times, and your patience was outrageous. You knew that it was a tired bunch approaching the line. You definitely weren't there with, a full lead out. The composition of the group was really broken up. But for you, what did you always find was your secret, or what headspace did you need to be in finals to be able to achieve your goals?
For me, I think that was to not overthink things. Or it was like a balance between like a plan and also your instincts. And that's something I also preach to a lot of my riders too, is like, we can plan ahead as much as we can, think about a million different scenarios and, come up with like a race plan. But 9 times out of 10, it's not going to go that way because there's so many other factors that affect it that you can't control. So I always rode with like, okay, this is like a general idea of how I want this to happen. But like in a fraction of a second, I need to pivot on my instinct, on my gut. And for example, for my finish at Flanders, I mean, you're exhausted. There was like many times that I was dropped in that race, and I just kept fighting back. And then, the pressure was on me to finish the race. And actually, Bols Dolmans had like a full lead out, and I had one other teammate, and she had chased the break back, and we caught the break of 4 with like 1K to go. So I was like fully surfing it, and I knew that too because my teammate Ellen Van Dyke had done all the work to bring it back. And yeah, I was just winging it, and I was just like super present in the moment. And I just went for it. I didn't look at the 200-meter to go sign and think, this is when I go. It's like a feeling, and every finish is different. You can't really say that I'm a 300-meter sprinter or I'm like a 200-meter sprinter. There's the wind, there's the teams, there's the lead out, there's the course, there's like all these other factors that affect how you're going to approach a finish. And I found that I was always really good at being able to pivot on those things in the moment, and kind of find my way to get to the line first. And yeah, I don't know, I can't really explain it. I just felt like that was the moment to go for me. And then I was going toe to toe with Chantal Block, and then I got a little bit ahead of her, and then she got a little bit ahead of me, and then we were just going like toe to toe to the line. And then, I kind of got clear from her, maybe like half a wheel, I remember. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, I'm winning Flanders. I was like, God, I hope nobody passes me. And I was just like going to the line, going to the line. And I tended to sprint with like my head a little bit down. And I look up once, I remember, and I was like, oh man, that line is still so far. I was like, nobody passed me, nobody passed me. And I just kept pushing, and yeah, nobody passed me. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like in shock. But yeah, that's how I tend to approach finishes and sprints is like, yeah, there's a general plan, but also like, yeah, just go with your gut because there's that feeling there that you can't really deny. You have to kind of go with it because that's where you want to be and where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that, Coryn, because that just talks about the difference between someone who is a bike racer and somebody who's not, instinctively a racer. I had a teammate, Elio Viviani, that had a tattoo on his arm that said Plan A. And I used to laugh because we'd always talk about Plan A in the meeting. We never even got close to it, even when we won. But it always felt for him that, if he did win, that was Plan A. And it's like, well, the plan can't be the outcome. The plan has to be the process, right? So if we know and we kind of just let go of this preconceived notion that we can control everything, we find that flow state that you're talking about. But I also had another interesting teammate, Marcel Kittel, who I did a lot of sprint training alongside. And he was a very instinctive rider. He didn't talk about where he was going to launch from, but he actually prepared himself strategically to be able to launch from anywhere. And that meant that some days we actually did 4-second sprints, which was practicing really coming around somebody in the last 40 meters. So we would get up to a sort of a high lactate feeling or a high speed or a high load, and then we'd kick from there. And then we'd also bring it back to an 8-second sprint, and then a 12-second sprint, and a 20-second sprint. And we'd also practice double kicking. And I think it's a little bit of a mistake that a lot of riders do in training is that they think a sprint is a sustained effort from start to finish for the duration. But we can actually have a lot of peaks within a sprint, or we can even bookend a sprint where we kick to speed and then we drag it back up again. So from your experience as an athlete and also as a coach, how did you practice your preparation to go into a sprint so that you were confident from sprinting at different places and different distances to the finish line?
Yeah, honestly, that is like practice makes perfect. So, as many opportunities as you can get to practice sprinting, whether it's in races or you're going for a speed limit sign or a town sign sprint with your friends on a training ride, if you can do as many as of those as you can, you learn from every single one. So it's not something where it's like, oh, do this 10 times and then you'll figure it out. It's like time after time after time after time. And you just keep learning and you want to keep growing, and, you mess up or you lose and you're like, you're pissed. You're like, man, what did I need to do to win that? And you go back and you think about it and you learn and you like, okay, so like one example where I really learned not to go at a specific spot. I remember I did this crit with UHC and I was doing, a little course recon with my teammate Hannah Barnes. And then we were like, oh yeah, we can't go before this street light. Like that's way too long. And so we were like in the final lap doing the lead out, and then it was like we were waiting for this street light to pass so that, I could start my sprint. And then, the team that we were racing against and the other favorite, Erica Allard, jumped before the light, and it like totally caught us off guard. And we were like, oh crap, like now we got to catch up. And we lost the race. But like the big learning point from that experience for the both of us was like, you just can't pick a spot and say like, this is where I start. You really have to be in the moment. And so, you really only learn that with repetition and like making those mistakes and doing a million sprints. And, growing up on junior teams, and we do team rides and group rides, that was my favorite thing, to go for speed limit signs or town signs. And it's like every chance you could get to try and win was like, one, super fun, and then two, it's great practice, and then three, you just learn from it a lot. So the more you can do it, the better. And like, yeah, just always have that beginner mindset, never be discouraged. And if anything, have it fuel you to want to learn more about better or what went wrong. And yeah, just keep going at it. Every chance is another chance for you to learn.
Yeah, I love that. Reframing that, instead of I lost, I failed, I screwed up, I made a mistake. It's like that's what we're here to do. That's how you learn. That's how you figure things out. I probably got dropped 3 years in a row at the local road race, the windy flat road race in Fort Collins called Buckeye, before I figured out like, this is how crosswinds work, right? That's how you figure it out. You go get your teeth kicked in, so to speak. So valuable lessons. Yeah. Keep trying, keep going, keep learning. I love it.
And that's, moments of growth. I mean, I think you learn more from losses or messing up than winning. Like winning is cool and great. You celebrate and you like think about all the hardship or everything you did before to get there. But when you do struggle, that's when you actually learn the most.
And how do you see people's obsession with power meters affecting sprint technique and training? One of the things that I feel many athletes don't have the correct relationship is between actually generating speed in the sprint because they're chasing, an average power for a 10-second effort or a maximum power in that. How do you coach people to understand that relationship, that power or your max power that you can do in training is not necessarily how you win a sprint?
Yeah, I think it's like the same analogy as like approaching something with a plan, and then also kind of meeting in the middle with instinct. Um, and yeah, with training and numbers, it's great, but to an extent, right? And then there's the part of racing and training where you have to go with your instinct and your gut. And I think same thing, it takes practice to learn that. And it's not always about numbers. And I always like tell my athletes like the numbers is actually like the easiest part. Like you can go out there and do whatever workout and nail it. But to put it together for an event is like a whole different thing. Um, and that comes with a lot of experience and instinct. And so you really have to try and pair it together to do well, because sure, you can do, you know, almost 2,000 watts in a sprint or whatever. But if you can't be in good position going into the last corner, what's it worth, right? So it is still important, the numbers and being able to be, you know, a strong sprinter, for example. But if you can't help the other pieces around it to even be able to use it, right? What's the point? So, you know, cycling, there's a lot of different factors, and you kind of have to approach it with everything to be able to do good and see progress. But, you know, it would be too easy if I just said, yeah, go out there, do 10, 20-second sprints, and you'll win, right? So that's just not how it works. Otherwise, we'd all be great at it. But yeah, so, you know, approaching it with that same mindset, and there's other parts to cycling other than just the power meter, to be able to do well and see progress.
So I had an experience early on in my World Tour career. My personality type was always just to go. And, you know, it was like I always felt that it was worse to be boxed in and not get to sprint. Like that to me was always very unsatisfying. So I'd often find a gap early and expose myself to needing to open up, you know, possibly too early in the race and not finding that flow. But there was this one training moment at a bunch ride in Adelaide before Tour Down Under, where there was probably 20 World Tour pros all in this bunch ride, and it was this huge lap around this shipping yard. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, because it was one of the ways that Colby always coached me to try to actually stay calm in those finals, where those impulses can drive you to make decisions sort of impulsively and, you know, not necessarily to win the race. It was always just take an extra breath before you acted. Just one more breath, slow everything down and try to find that calm in the moment. And it was this amazing moment where everybody started their sprint because they were all being super impulsive. They wanted to show each other who was the strongest, who was the best. And I took a breath and I stayed on the wheel. And then they sort of did that sprinting thing where they're on each other's wheels, And then about 50 meters before the line, everyone just completely blew up. And I never actually did a sprint. I just sort of popped off the wheel and beat everybody. And for me, there was this learning moment where actually having the patience and self-control to not just go for it and not just try to show that you're the strongest guy, that cycling is not CrossFit. I won the race, I think, peaking at like 800 watts. And that was probably done trying to stay on the wheel. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that practicing sprinting as many times as you can with friends for town signs. This is where you learn those really important moments, that it's not about being the world's strongest bike rider, the world's quickest bike rider. It's chess.
Absolutely. And to add on that too, in my perspective, I think winning is not about being like the strongest. You know, I think it's about like saving your strengths for the right moment and then using them. And you win more by like saving energy in these small pockets and these small moments of racing. And then if you use it at the right moment and the right time, you know, great things will happen for you. And you know, the training aspect is, you know, being prepared and making sure that you are strong enough to be able to do it, but to have and make that opportunity for yourself to use it in the right way to win. That's where you put the two together, and that's what I really love about racing.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I wanted to ask one last sort of line of question though, Coryn, for the win. I'm stuck in my old habits die hard, right? Coryn, you're a mum now, and you know, parenting really does kick your ass. It's not easy. You know, it's a very unique challenge, but not unlike cycling in the sense that, you know, you're on this thought pattern all the time. You know, there's this thing in your life that's more important than you, or you know, whilst you're a cyclist fully focused on it, you definitely think that that's true. So I think there's some strengths that you get from cycling. But I wanted to ask you, because I'm curious to see how you feel about this as a coach. Now that you're a parent, you're also coaching, you have other business that you do through your life. So you have a lot on and you try to pack in a lot of things. Do you find that being a mother now has helped you relate to your clients that also have busy lives?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I see like and I've never heard this before, but in in my eyes, I see a really big parallel with training. Um, um, the difference being, it's not performance for me, but I'm growing a little human, and how do I raise her to be a good human. And that is, doing meals 3 times a day, getting the nap times and like that routine. It's like the same kind of routine with the cycling pro lifestyle that I was really used to. Getting enough sleep, getting enough nutrition, having that playtime to develop and learn. And for her case, it's like fine and gross motor skills and whatever else in communication. Um, but yeah, the same thing can be said for, now coaching other athletes. It's obviously a different goal. But yeah, I think going from an athlete now to a coach, there's definitely a little bit more patience, trying to understand, the athlete and what their needs are, and what their goals are, and trying to learn what makes them tick, how to motivate them, where are moments where, hey, let's back down a little bit on some things and let's put a little bit more energy in these things, or yeah, just kind of taking a broader view at the athlete and the goal and the situation, and then kind of dialing that in. How can I help? How can I be your biggest teammate to help you get to where you want to be? And then also just having an extra perspective for them and be like, you know, let's approach this with a really realistic mindset. There's no reason you can't do this, but you know, you were sick 3 weeks before, or you were dealing with an injury, so we didn't maybe have the most ideal preparation getting going towards that. So also trying to keep the feet on the ground a little bit, and just kind of show this is where we're at, and that's okay. And the good thing about that is you can continue to progress, and we can also set another goal, another season, whatever else, and get motivated again to attack the next goal. And so yeah, there's a lot of parallels with that, and definitely being a mom now, I think helps me understand the patience piece, and then also the understanding piece of being a coach, and learning to communicate in the right way, because every athlete is different. Their backgrounds and their needs are all different, and what makes them motivated is always different too. So a lot of adjustment, a lot of learning, and of course challenges. But I those are the things that I actually really love. So I really do enjoy it.
Outstanding. Uh, One of the things that I like to remind my riders or teach my riders is that, from my perspective, sport is kind of training for life. And this is a great example of that, right? All the skills you've cultivated and honed as an athlete now are helping you raise a good person. So there's so many aspects of sport that bleed over into our lives in positive ways. So it just reinforces that whole point about integrating athletics into our life, and also keeping perspective on it, to understand that when we participate in sport, whether it's cycling or soccer or whatever we're doing, that it's giving us skills that we can take into making lunches and maintaining rhythm with nap time. The simplest things, but those are the things that cultivate health and well-being in all of us and in our families. So that's invaluable. If you don't have health, what do you have, right? So
I love it. Well, Coryn, we have to say, from all of us, thanks for joining us on the show. I always love speaking with you and learning from you, even if I mispronounce your name. And yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about Coryn, I would even like to potentially be coached by Coryn, check it out at Team EF Coaching online, LinkedIn, or on Instagram. Coryn's an amazing person and an even more amazing coach from everything that I've experienced.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making time today. We appreciate it.
All right. Signing off, Space Monkeys. Thank you for tuning into the Cycling Performance Podcast. This podcast is produced by myself, Nathan Haas, and Colby Pierce, in association with EF Education and Team EF Coaching, a world leader in cycling coaching for all ages, abilities, and goals. Our world-class team of coaches have won over 100 national titles across all disciplines of cycling, competed in 47 Grand Tours with victories in all 3 and 6 Olympic Games. So it's our goal to distill our experiences to bring you the most cutting-edge approach to cycling to achieve your goals, dreams, and aspirations in our beautiful sport. If you'd like to learn more about Team EF Coaching, find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, or at our website, teamefcoaching.com. We would like to thank Peridur ap Gwynedd from Pendulum for the energetic theme music, and to Ross Hallard, our wonderful editor. Ride in flow, Space Monkeys!